Sunday morning arrived, cold and windless. The air outside the workshop hung heavy with the smell of damp cedar. And for once, even the birds seemed to hesitate before singing. I arrived early, wanting to prepare myself before they came. The wooden tables gleamed faintly from the oil I had rubbed into them the night before. In the center sat the ivy-carved mantel clock, its brass pendulum swinging like a pulse I could borrow strength from. I laid everything out with the precision Grandpa would have admired the ledger. The notarized letters, the deed copies, each sealed in transparent sleeves. 3 identical folders waited in a neat row, one for Mother, one for my sister, and one for me. The ticking filled the quiet like a metronome marking the pace of courage. At 9 sharp, the sound of tires crunching gravel reached my ears. I steadied my breathing. The door creaked open. Mother entered first, wearing her church coat, though it wasn't Sunday service. Her perfume hit the air too sweet, too strong, a scent I'd always associated with control. Me sister followed, holding her phone like a shield. "What is this?" Mother asked before even taking off her gloves. "You made it sound urgent." "It is." I gestured toward the table. "Sit down. Please." She remained standing, chin high. "We don't have all day." "That's fine," I said quietly. "This won't take long." For a few moments, no one spoke. The rain outside had frozen into mist, wrapping the windows in a dull gray haze. I pushed the first folder toward Mother. "Everything in there is related to Grandpa's trust and property transfers." I began. "I've confirmed with the county clerk and the bank that funds meant for my custodial account were withdrawn without authorization by you." Mother's hand froze halfway to the folder. "That's absurd. The ledger shows your initials beside each transfer," I said, keeping my tone steady. "And these notarized letters confirm that those assets were to remain untouched until I signed for them. I never did." My sister shifted in her seat, eyes darting between us. "I don't know what you think this proves," Mother said, flipping the folder open with practiced nonchalance. "He was confused in his final years." "He wasn't." I reached for the clock, turning it gently so the back faced them. "He built this with his own hands. Inside, he left those letters, hidden, locked with a key he mailed to me after he passed." She frowned, lips tightening. "A coincidence. Probably some sentimental nonsense." I unlocked the panel and pulled out the originals. The brass hinge squeaked softly, the sound slicing through the silence like a blade. "He planned for this," I said. "He knew someone might twist his words. That's why he documented every sale and had it notarized." My sister leaned closer, her voice smaller than usual. "Mom, that's his handwriting." Mother shot her a sharp look. "Enough. You don't know what you're seeing." I took a deep breath. "I do. And so will the court." I opened the second folder. "This is the settlement proposal, Mr. Carson drafted. It gives you 48 hours to agree to repayment of the misused funds, restore title rights, and sign a written acknowledgement of wrongdoing. If you refuse, we'll proceed with a civil claim. Once that's filed, the bank will cooperate with discovery, and the notaries involved will testify." Mother's eyes narrowed. "You think you can threaten your own family?" "I'm not threatening," I said. "I'm offering a chance to make it right quietly." My sister swallowed hard. "How much are we talking about?" I opened the ledger to the final page and slid it toward her. Every number is there. Nearly $83,000 in property sales and account transfers, all under Grandpa's name after his death. Her jaw slackened. "Mom, I didn't know it was that much." Mother's tone turned cold. "Don't be dramatic. It went to the household. Your father was sick. There were bills. Bills don't explain the boutique's renovation," I said softly. "Or the new SUV." She looked at me then. Truly looked, her expression flashing something between guilt and fury. "After everything I've done for this family, You want to humiliate me over paperwork? No, I said. I just want the truth acknowledged, the same way Grandpa intended it to be. The pendulum's reflection glimmered on the papers. I could almost feel him in the room, steady, patient, silent. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mother stepped closer, reaching for the ledger. You shouldn't have this. I slid it out of reach. It's legally mine. You can read it here. But you won't take it. Her voice rose. You always twist everything. Always the victim. Do you have any idea how ungrateful you sound? I didn't answer. The anger in her tone no longer pierced me. It brushed past like wind through branches. My sister's phone buzzed on the table. She silenced it quickly, her face pale. Mom, maybe we should sign. It's not worth a lawsuit. Don't be ridiculous. Mother snapped. She's bluffing. I'm not, I said, opening the third folder. Inside lay copies of the deed chain and bank confirmations. These will be submitted if you ignore the deadline. She turned toward me, eyes sharp with something deeper than anger. Fear. You think this will bring you peace. All it will do is make you alone. I've been alone for years, I said quietly. At least now it'll be honest. For the first time, her shoulders sagged. The defiance faltered, replaced by a weary disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend losing control of the story. She exhaled slowly. You always were stubborn, just like him. It wasn't meant as a compliment, but it felt like one. We sat in silence again. The clock ticked, measuring the distance between us. My sister's eyes filled with tears. She refused to let fall. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I thought Mom was just handling paperwork. Mother's gaze hardened. Don't start blaming me. I'm not, she said softly. I'm just tired of pretending. Her words cracked something open in the room. I stood and gathered the folders. You have 48 hours, I repeated, my voice steady. After that, everything goes to Mr. Carson for filing. Mother opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. Her eyes flicked to the clock, the pendulum swinging with relentless rhythm. She turned away, muttering something under her breath. At the door, she paused. You're no daughter of mine if you go through with this. I met her gaze. Then I guess you've already practiced pretending I don't exist. She left without another word. My sister lingered by the doorway, tears streaking her mascara. I don't know how to fix this, she said. Start by telling the truth. I answered. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and followed Mother into the cold. When the sound of their car faded, I locked the door and leaned against it. My knees weak, but my chest strangely light. The workshop was quiet except for the clock's heartbeat. I set my hands on the table and whispered. It started. I knew the next days would be brutal calls, threats, guilt trips. But I also knew that for the first time, I wasn't reacting from fear. I was standing on evidence. I picked up the clock and looked into its glass face. My reflection trembled with the movement of the pendulum, like time itself, acknowledging what had been stolen and what was finally returning. On the table lay the copies of the settlement letters. I slid them into an envelope marked, to be delivered, if deadline missed, and sealed it. Then I wrote, in small, neat letters, let truth do the work. The same line Grandpa had written years ago. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks in the old siding. I turned off the lights, leaving only the clock's faint glow from its brass edges. The pendulum swung, steady and certain. Tomorrow, justice would begin its slow, measured work. The 48 hours crawled by like a slow train. I went to work, answered phones, checked copays, smiled at patients who needed kindness more than speed. Between calls, my hands found the edge of the desk and held on. I kept the envelope marked, to be delivered, if deadline missed, tucked inside my bag. the corner pressing a small triangle into the leather. Every time I reached for my keys, I felt it. On the second evening, my sister texted Mom's thinking, "Please don't do anything yet." I typed, "I already waited. The clock is ticking." Then I stopped, erased the words, and sent a softer line. "Have her read the last notarized letter again." There was no reply. At 9:06 p.m., the deadline passed. I sat at my kitchen table, the mantel clock steady behind me. I thought of calling. I thought of giving them one more hour. Then I pictured the church hall where I had not been welcome. The line of transfers recorded in the ledger. The years of being told I misunderstood what was plain to see. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Carson. "It's time," I said. "I'll file at 9 tomorrow." He answered, "Get some sleep." I didn't sleep. I stood by the window and watched a neighbor's porch light turn on and off as he took the dog out. The town was quiet. I imagined Grandpa walking through his workshop in his old jacket, his hands slow and careful. The way he checked every corner before he locked the door. He had left me the key because he knew I would listen. Now I had to finish the work. By noon the next day, the civil claim was filed. Mr. Carson sent copies of the stamped complaint to the bank and the title company, along with a request to preserve records. He also filed a lis pendens on the property they had reassigned. A small legal flag that said, "This is disputed. Do not sell or mortgage until the court says otherwise." Not an hour later, Mother called from a blocked number. "You vindictive child," she said without greeting. "Do you know what you've done? You've put a stain on our name. People talk." I pressed the phone to my shoulder and studied the clock's glass face. "I gave you 2 days to keep this private. You chose silence. You chose violence." She shot back. I swallowed, tasting the word. "No, I chose documentation." There was a brittle laugh on the other end. "You think papers make you right. They make me honest," I said. "And they tell a story you can't rewrite." She hung up. The silence after the click felt bigger than the room. 10 minutes later, my sister texted Mom's furious. She says, "You'll be sorry." I typed I already was. That's why I stopped waiting. The first complication came that afternoon. The bank officer phoned Mr. Carson with a question about the notarized letters. "The notary listed here retired last year," he said. "We'll need her confirmation that these were authentic. The number they had for her was out of service." Mr. Carson called me. "It's a hiccup. Not a wall. We'll find her." I felt a small wobble inside my chest. "What if we can't?" "We will," he said. "And if not, we have the ledger and the deed chain. The case doesn't rest on one signature. But let me try." He tried. And so did I. I called 3 different offices, each sending me to another receptionist with another idea. At the end of the day, I had a name and the rumor that the notary had moved to a lake community an hour north. No address. No number. That night I sat with the clock on my lap, the pendulum tapping a gentle beat against uncertainty. A thought came the way. A lamp warms a cold room slow. Then obvious, Grandpa kept everything. If he needed a notary, he would have tucked a business card into a drawer where it belonged. I drove to the workshop in my slippers and old coat. The parking lot was empty. The night thin and sharp. Inside, the air smelled like dust and pine shavings. I flicked on the light and stood still, letting my eyes adjust. Then I went to the tool wall and started opening drawers. Not wildly, not like a search party, but the way I once watched him work one drawer. Then the next, every item back in its place. I found the card in a narrow box labeled "Gluing and Finishing." It was tucked under a strip of sandpaper Eleanor Gray. Notary Public. The number was old, but the email address looked current. I took a photo and emailed her from my phone at 1243 A.M. Miss Gray. My grandfather, Martin Halbrook, used your services years ago. I am seeking confirmation of letters you notarized for him regarding estate directives. I have copies and can bring originals. Please advise if you can verify your seal and log entry. Thank you. E. Halbrook. I watched the clock until my eyes burned. At 7:12 a.m. A reply appeared. I remember, Mr. Ree. Halbrook. He said truth needed good paper. Bring what you have at noon today. I will check my book. I pressed a hand to my forehead and laughed quietly. Relief shaking out of me like dust from a rug. The mistake, my panic. My late-night search had led to a new thread. The clock had nudged me again. At Ms. Gray's kitchen table. Sunlight spilled over checkered curtains and the smell of cinnamon rolls. She was in her 70s with quick eyes and a voice that could cut a knot without a blade. She studied the letters through a magnifier, then flipped open a worn, blue-backed notary journal with numbers written in tidy columns. She found the date. She found Grandpa's name. Here it is, she said, tapping the line. 2 documents. Signed in my presence. I saw his driver's license and the workshop lease. He said he wanted the papers to outlive any arguments. Can you write a statement, I asked. I can do better, she said. She took out a pre-printed verification form, filled in the details, and signed with a careful hand. Then she turned to me. People trust their voices too much. Paper is memory when memory fails. I carried her statement to Mr. Prubel. Carson like a warm loaf of bread. He read it and nodded once. This plugs the only leak they could have used to float away. By the end of the week, the title company acknowledged the lis pendens and placed a notice in their system. A neighbor of my grandfather's, Mr. Places, Evans. The landlord came by the office to sign a brief affidavit stating he had seen Grandpa place documents in the clock and had heard him say, "If there is a dispute, this clock will settle it." The line made Mr. Osa's Carson smile. Judges like simple sentences, he said. They remember them. Mother's lawyer. A man with the clipped tone of someone who likes to be paid by the hour, sent us a response, arguing that the funds had been used in good faith for family needs. The letter used phrases like informal consent and implied authority. At the bottom, he wrote, "Our clients deny any wrongdoing and will not sign any admission." That evening, I sat on my couch and read the letter again and again. The words tried to press guilt into my skin like a stamp family needs. Implied. I felt fear rise. A wave that didn't crash but stayed heavy and wet around my ribs. I thought of calling to say I was sorry for making it ugly. I thought of how tired I was. Instead, I stood, rolled my shoulders, and began to put new tabs on our folders. Notary verification. Lis pendens. Affidavit Evans. Deed chain. Ledger pages. I breathed with each label. Long and slow. The way the clinic nurse tells anxious patients to breathe before a blood draw. When I finished, the fear had thinned to a wire I could hold without cutting my hand. The settlement conference was set for Tuesday. The conference room was plain carpet squares. Ceiling tiles. A long table that had seen 1,000 arguments before ours. Mr. Carson sat to my left. Across from us. Mother wore a navy suit and a fixed smile. The kind she used for church photos. My sister kept her eyes on a paper cup. Their attorney spread a stack of forms like a dealer with a deck. He spoke first. We are prepared to consider a resolution, but there will be no admission of wrongdoing. Mr. Carson folded his hands. The documents and the timeline speak for themselves. We expect repayment, transfer corrections, and a written acknowledgement that the funds were misallocated. Words matter, the man said smoothly. Misallocated implies intent. Then call it diverted. Call it used contrary to the designated purpose. The point is clarity. Mother's mouth tightened. Your grandfather loved this family, she said to me. He would never have wanted this hostility. I held her gaze. He loved this family enough to make sure the truth could stand without shouting. Her eyes flickered. Mr. Carson slid the notary verification forward. This confirms the letters were executed properly. The affidavit confirms where they were kept. The deed chain shows unauthorized transfers. The ledger documents diversion from a custodial account. We can have the bank officer testify regarding POA limits after death. The other attorney glanced at Mother. If your daughter insists, we can go to court and spend a year paying strangers to read to us. Or we can settle now. Quietly. Your choice. Mother stared at the table. My sister's cup trembled in her hands. For a moment, no one moved. Then my sister said softly, I want it to end. Something in Mother's shoulders loosened, then tightened, like a rope slipping through a fist. She didn't look at me when she answered. What are the numbers? Mr. Carson named them. Repayment over 18 months. Transfer of the small property back to the trust for my sole benefit. As Grandpa had intended. Written acknowledgement that the funds had been used for purposes not described in the letters. Agreement to refrain from any public statements that contradicted the paperwork. Mother's lips thinned. And if we refuse, then discovery begins. Mr. Carson said, the first piece will be the subpoena for bank video that shows who signed the closure forms. She flinched. It was small, but it was there. I looked down to hide that I saw it. 18 months is too short. The attorney said, they need 36. We can stretch to 24. Mr. Carson said, with the first payment within 30 days. If the first payment is missed, the full amount accelerates. Mother's eyes flashed. You want us on a leash. I want you on a plan, he said. She sighed. Fine. The word landed like a thud in the room. My sister let out a breath that almost sounded like a sob. We spent an hour going line by line. The way I once watched Grandpa sand a tabletop. Patient and exact. There were quibbles over dates and commas. There was a fuss about whether the word apology should appear anywhere. Mr. Carson didn't push for the word. He pushed for accuracy. By the end, we had signatures on 3 copies and a schedule for transfers and repayments, along with the title company's draft for returning the property, as Grandpa's letters described. As we stood to leave, Mother spoke to me without moving her mouth. The words like air through teeth, you will regret this. I looked at her hands. They were older than mine. Veins raised like lines on a map. I already regret too much. I said, this is the first thing I won't lease. She turned away. My sister paused at the door and touched my sleeve. A touch, so light, I almost missed it. She didn't say sorry. She didn't have to. Her eyes did. Outside. The day was pale and windless. I walked to my car feeling equal parts heavy and relieved. Like someone who has set down a box only to realize how long she has carried it. The next weeks were quiet. The first payment came on time. The title correction processed slowly. As title correction do. But each email brought another confirmation. Another small square of certainty tiled into place. I kept the clock on my kitchen counter. I oiled the hinge on the hidden panel. Wiped the glass face. And wound it like Grandpa had shown me gentle. Never forcing the key. There were days I felt a curl of guilt in my stomach. A memory of Mother's words during the conference. The tight line of her jaw. On those days I stood over the sink and let the water run warm over my wrists. I told myself the plain truth. I hadn't burned anything down. I had turned on a light. People can stumble in the dark. Light doesn't push. One evening, I took the workshop sign M. Halbrook and Son from the corner where I'd leaned it and hung it above my doorway. It looked wrong there. Like a guest at the wrong table. I took it down and placed it on a low shelf near the clock instead. The wood glowed in the lamplight. I traced the letters with a finger. I said out loud, I'll be your and son if that's what it takes. But I know you meant me. I smiled then. And the smile stayed. A small thing happened that mattered to me more than I expected. At the grocery store, Mr. Evans stopped beside my cart. and nodded at the loaf of bread I was debating. "Cinnamon raisin," he said. "Your granddad used to bring that to the shop when we had late nights." He cleared his throat. "Folks around town heard there was some legal thing. I told them only that you were doing what he would have done. That seemed to settle the talk." I felt my eyes sting. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said gently. "Thank the man who left you a clock full of truth." I bought the cinnamon raisin. On the first warm afternoon of spring, I drove to the workshop with a tin of polish and a rag. The landlord had agreed to let me use the space on weekends until I figured out what to do with it. Sunlight poured through the high windows. Dust floated like soft snow. I set the clock on the workbench and wiped it carefully. Then did the same for the long table we had used for our first meeting. The grain shone under the cloth. I heard Grandpa's voice in the quiet, not words. Exactly. But that patient rhythm he had when he worked. The rhythm the clock knew by heart. On a shelf, I found a small stack of unfinished boxes. The lids didn't sit flush. The corners needed care. I picked one up and tested the fit with the smallest chisel. The wood answered like an old friend, resistant, then forgiving. I worked slowly. Sand. Wipe. Fit. Check. Sand again. I didn't make a plan for the space or for my life. I didn't talk about turning the workshop into something new. Not yet. I just brought one small thing back into alignment. Later, I placed the finished box beside the clock. It was not perfect. It was honest. I wish I could say the family changed overnight. They didn't. There were still cold shoulders at the pharmacy line. Still whispers at the diner when people thought I couldn't hear. Mother didn't call. My sister texted twice. Short lines about the payments. About the day she took the SUV in for service and felt stupid signing the receipt. I should have asked more questions. She wrote. I typed. So should I. We can start now. She sent a thumbs up. It was small. It was something. On the day the title correction finalized, the county clerk stamped the last document with a bright red seal. She handed me the copy and smiled. I like when papers end where they were supposed to start, she said. I walked out into the light and held the page up like a pane of glass. For a second, the town beyond it looked sharper. The cafe on the corner, the bus stop, the parked truck with a dented fender, ordinary things with edges I could trust. I folded the document into my bag and went home by the river road. Windows down. Spring air carrying the smell of damp earth, and something green beginning. That night, I sat at my table with the clock beside me and wrote a short letter. I didn't address it to anyone. I wrote it to the wood, to the paper, to the pendulum, to the man who had known I would need all three. You were right. I wrote, truth did the work, your hands could not. I was afraid. I was tired. I doubted myself, but the proof did not doubt. It held steady until I learned how to hold steady. 2. I folded the letter and put it in the finished box. Not to hide. To keep. When I turned off the lamp, the brass rim of the clock caught the last tivin, a thin ribbon of light, and held it a moment longer than the room. If you are listening now, if you are someone who has been told you are too sensitive, too dramatic, too much, there is a way to stand without shouting. It isn't easy. You will feel the old fear, the old guilt, the urge to sit down and say nothing, because saying nothing makes the room quiet. But quiet is not peace. Peace is work and paper and a steady line that won't bend because someone says it should. I don't wish revenge on anyone. I wanted the truth to outlast our habits of pretending. It did. I'm learning to sit with that relief and sadness together and to honor the man who taught me to listen for what is true. The clock ticks. The box sits beside it. Every morning I wind the spring and feel the key turn. Gentle. Certain. Every evening I check that the hands still meet at the right places. Some nights I stand at the window and think about the day in the church hall when I was not invited. And I feel no fire. Only a clear space where I can finally breathe. This is how I carry him forward, not with speeches. Not with blame, but with work that keeps its promise. Sand along the grain. Fit the lid. Oil the hinge. Let the proof speak. Let the light in. If this story touched you, if it reminded you to stand up, to be gentle with your own doubt, or to speak with the calm strength of facts, please, like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps more people find stories about quiet courage, steady justice, and the kind of love that prepares a place for truth. I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments about the moments you chose honesty, the small tools that helped you, or the ways someone's foresight protected you when you needed it most.